to the old imperial palace. Here, a huge crowd waits to hear the official announcement of the Federation of Ethiopia and Eritrea from the emperor's own lips. Eritrea, an Italian colony conquered by the British, has been under our control for 7 years. Now, with the approval of the United Nations, she is united with her neighboring country, Ethiopia.
Ethiopia fell to Italy, uniting Ethiopia and Eritrea for the first time. In 1941, British troops defeated the Italians and reinstalled Haile Selassie on the throne of Ethiopia. But no freedom was given to Eritrea, which remained under the control of the British. At the end of the Second World War, the United Nations started talking about what was to be done with Italy's former colonies in Africa. In 1952, the United Nations decided that Eritrea should be joined to Ethiopia in a federation, although Eritrea would be allowed to keep its own flag, its own parliament, and its own judicial system. The United States supported Haile Selassie and wanted to make use of Eritrea's strategic location on the Red Sea. So, the United Nations voted for the federation scheme. In 1962, Haile Selassie unilaterally decreed Eritrea a province of Ethiopia, this against the will of the United Nations. The United States used Eritrea for its own military purposes. Outside Asmara, the Eritrean capital, the Americans built a Kagnew communications base. This base played quite an important role during the Seven-Day War in the Middle East in 1967 and during the Vietnam War. In 1974, Haile Selassie was overthrown and a military regime called People from towns and villages are forced to flee into the open countryside. Many are given protection by the liberation movement, and some are settled in newly built villages called Tahadiso. Tahadiso dwellers are housed in the safest areas that can be found. Traveling to these places often takes a long time and can be dangerous. Traveling is done at night to avoid
labor unions and military units. The government's unwillingness or inability to respond to these demands eventually led to the overthrow of the Emperor Haile Selassie and the ascension to power of the Provisional Military Administrative Committee, also known as the DERG. The DERG was established in June 1974 as the coordinating committee of the Armed Forces, Police and Territorial Army by officers of the Ethiopian Army and Police, and they were led initially by the chairman Aman Andom. The subject of this video, Mengistu Haile Mariam, later became the chairman of the DERG, and after the arrest of the Emperor Haile Selassie in September of 1974.
የነጻነት ተጋድሎ ከፋሽስት ወረራ ዋዜማ ጀምሮ አያሌ የጦር ሜዳ ጀግኖችን ሲያፈራ ከቆየው ከታሪካዊ አንድ ፓርቲ
የአይናችሁ ቀለም አላማረኝም እና ውጡ ካለ ኢትዮጵያ መንግስት መውጣት ነው ያለባቸው። የጸጥታ ሌላ ጥያቄ ሳይነስ የአይናችሁ ቀለም አላማረኝም እና ውጡ
ንጉዳይ ሰላምን ሰናይ ጉርብትናን ንዘራእኻዮ ቅሩብነትን ተገዳስነትን ዘለኒ አክብሮት ክገልጸካ ይፈቱ። ኣብዚ እዋን እዚ ካብ እቲ ጀሚርናዮ ዘለና ጉዳይ ሰላም ንላዕሊ ንገደሰሉ ጉዳይ ስለ ዘይብልና ንጉዳይ ሰላም ናይ ቀዳምነት ጌርካ ከም ትሰርዖ ብሙሉእ አቅምካ ከም ትሰርዑን ዘለኒ እምነት ሙሉእ እዩ። ስለዝኾነ ድማ ነቲ አንጻር ረብሓታት ህዝብታትና ጠጠው ዝበለ መንደቅ ፍልሊ ኣብ ምፍራስን ነቲ ንኣስታት 20 ዓመታት ዝወሰደን ድሕሪ ህይወት ኣሽሓት ምብላዕን ከቢድ እንወትን እንርከበሉ ኩነታት ሞት አልባ ኩናት ዛዚምና ናብ እቲ ክልቶም ህዝብታት ዝርብሕሉ ምዕራፍ ንምስግጋር ዝጀመርካዮ ቅዱስ ላማ ሽቶ ከም ዝወቅዕ አይጠራጠርን።
እና ልብ ተባባሪ እንዲሆን አደራ ማለት እፈልጋለሁ። አንደኛ የዛሬ 30 ዓመት ገደማ ኢትዮጵያ የሁለት ወደብ ባለቤት ነበረች። የዛሬ 30 ዓመት ገደማ ኢትዮጵያ ሁለት ወደብ በነበራት ጊዜ 46-47 ሚሊዮን ገደማ ህዝብ ነበራት። ኢትዮጵያ በዛ ጊዜ 10-12-13 ቢሊዮን ዶላር ጂዲፒ ነበራት። አሁን ያለንበትን በኋላ መጣበታለን። ከ30 ዓመት በኋላ ከሁለት ወደብ ባለቤትነት ሁለት ወደብ በንግድ ህግ መጠቀም ወደምትችልበት ደረጃ ዝቅ አለች። ቢያንስ አሰብንና ጅቡቲን በገንዘቧ በንግድ ህግ በስምምነት መጠቀም ወደምትችልበት ዝቅ አለች። ከተወሰነ ጊዜ በኋላ ኢትዮጵያና ኤርትራ መካከል ግጭት ሲያጋጥም አንደኛው ቀረና ወደ አንድ ወደብ ዝቅ አለ፣ ወደ ጅቡቲ። ጅቡቲን በሚመለከት የጅቡቲ መንግስትና ህዝብ ለኢትዮጵያ እድገት ያደረገው አስተዋጽኦ ብቻ ሳይሆን
attention to Ethiopia. It's an East African country of about 120 million people. They've just celebrated 1 year since the end of a civil war. A war between the military and local militias. The Ethiopian forces are under President Abiy Ahmed. The local militias were in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region. The war ended last year, but it was not a peaceful year for Ethiopia. Another conflict began. In fact, it's still on. This is in the country's Amhara region, again between Abiy Ahmed's forces and local militias. Meanwhile, floods have devastated the other side of the country. At least 20 people have died and thousands have been displaced. So calling this chaotic would be an understatement. Let me ask you a question instead. What would you do if your country was constantly beset with turmoil? Whatever your answer, it won't match the president's. Abiy Ahmed is a Nobel laureate. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. In the last few years, he's led 3 wars and now he's hinting at a 4th one. He's been drumming up tensions. This time with all of Ethiopia's neighbors. It started with his statements on the Red Sea. Abiy Ahmed wants access to it, the Red Sea. Slight problem though. Ethiopia is a landlocked country, one of the most populated landlocked nations in the world. And Abiy Ahmed feels that geography is hurting his economy. So what's the solution? Take a port from a neighbor, it seems. He hasn't made an open threat yet. Ahmed says he wants to strike a bargain. And what's his offer? Shares in valuable Ethiopian assets as payment for a port. Also, he doesn't seem to be willing to take no for an answer. He's made public speeches in recent weeks all about getting a port. He talks about it in a televised address and even to business leaders during forums. He apparently told them that the military option was on the table, that they would use force if required. Reports say Abiy Ahmed told this to local business leaders, but he denies it publicly. He says he does not want another war, although his rhetoric says otherwise. Let me quote from what he said. The lack of port access was, quote unquote, a potential source of future conflict. It does sound like a threat, and it's being seen as a threat.